I do some consulting work on American
feeling in the room was
You
palpable.
don't ever say to her that
What about the Chautauqua Institute?
Introductory discussion on the ethical
We left.
more of a community.
Before China took back over.
Currently doing in autism.
You could say art is in her blood. Victoria Browning Wyeth is the great-granddaughter of illustrator N.C. Wyeth, the niece of contemporary realist Jamie Wyeth, and the only grandchild of iconic artist Andrew Wyeth. A docent of Wyeth art, she began giving gallery talks when she was 15 and continues to lecture extensively on the topic, both in the U.S. and abroad. We'll talk with her about growing up in the first family of American art, about the lessons she learned at her grandfather's knee, and about what she's doing with her degree in psychology. Here's our conversation with Victoria Browning Wyeth. Victoria Wyeth, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What was it like growing up in what many consider the first family of American art?
I mean, to me, it seemed totally normal. You know, I'd wake up, in the summer and look outside, and Andy would be outside painting. And
your grandfather.
My grandfather.
Andrew
My
Wyeth.
grandfather. He hated me calling him Grandpa because he said, "Oh, everyone will know how old I am." I'm like, Jesus, you're 91. I think they know how old you are. But it seemed totally normal. The thing that kind of made it a little unusual is when I started to realize that all the people in the pictures were the people I was hanging out with. So, you just have this epiphany all of a sudden, and then you realize, like on his birthday, for example, in the summer, the president would always call. So I'd pick up the phone. This is the White House for Mr. Wyeth, and I'd say, Andy, and I
You literally called him Andy?
Yeah, always.
And you called your grandmother?
I call her Betsy.
Betsy.
Yeah.
Okay.
When he pisses me off, I call him Grandpa, just because it would get him so angry, because it'd make him feel old. Or if we were in a big crowd, I'd be like, Grandpa, and he'd look at me. Yeah. Jamie's Jamie instead of Uncle Jamie. But my parents are Mommy and Daddy.
You started giving tours of the Wyeth galleries at the Brandywine River Museum in Chadsford, Pennsylvania, when you were 15 years old.
I started at the Farnsworth Art Museum when
Maine.
when I was about 14,
Okay.
15. I didn't start at the Brandywine until 2004.
Oh, okay.
I needed a summer job when I was like 14, 15, and I loved my parents, but they were giving me like $5 a week for an allowance, and it just wasn't cutting it. So I started doing these tours, and I really didn't understand exactly I'm not going to say the magnitude of what I was doing, but kind of, I would go home and I'd have all my questions, and Andy would sit there explaining them, and it just...
So he encouraged you to do this?
Oh, totally,
Okay.
yeah. And he told me what to say. I mean, I know, God, I'm 14 years old, and I'd have these crappy little note cards that I'd bring into the tour, and I'd get so nervous because my mother would be there on the tour, because...
And your mother, of course, is an art consultant.
Of course,
Your father
right.
was an
Yes.
art dealer.
Mm-hmm. And so they, they think they know everything about art history and symbolism, and all of this. And so Mommy would be on the tour, looking at me, and I'd drop all the cards and kind of frantically pick them up. But Andy was great. I'd go home and he'd explain everything to me, and it just got, every summer, it got better and better. And then finally, I started asking the questions, and that's when I think everything really set in.
What people really like about those tours, which you have since taken on the road, is this insider's knowledge of the Wyeth family.
See, I don't get that. I mean, I'm used to giving the tours, so I don't, when people say, oh, you make it come to life, I'm just explaining them the way he explained it to me. And so I guess it's just because he was my grandpa, I can offer maybe a different view than the art historian.
Well, you mentioned symbolism, and art historians they love to say what an artist was thinking when they did this or that, and you said your grandfather rejected that whole idea, and there's one story in particular that I think is great. The painting is Willard's coat.
Yes.
Tell us.
Okay. So Willard was this wonderful African-American guy that just showed up one day at the studio, knocked on the door, and basically moved in for like 10 years. And he was very phobic of human skeletons. So Andy got a skeleton for painting, for anatomy, and Willard freaked out and left. And all he left behind was this apple in his jacket.
Did he get that skeleton to make him leave? Or?
No, he just wanted it for anatomy. But this is when you could buy real human skeletons, not like the black market, So, so this big skeleton comes in, and Willard flips out, and he leaves behind this apple in the coat. So Andy does this picture, calls it Willard's coat. So I'm on the phone with my mom one day, and she said, yes, the apple has deep significance and symbolic meaning. I said, what are you talking about? Well, yes, it was symbolic of your great-grandfather, and he had apple orchards.
N.C. Wyeth.
Of course, N.C.
illustrator.
Wyeth, right? It's so funny hearing N.C. Wyeth, but yeah, N.C. And he was killed in a car accident, so Mommy said this was my grandfather's inability to deal with the death. So I'm a snuggler, and so Andy and I are snuggling one day, and I said, well, this is what Mommy said. And he said, that's ridiculous. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Willard left, and all he left was the apple. So I called up Mom with Andy there, told her what he said, and I'll never forget, he doesn't even understand the deeper meaning of his work. And, and it just, to me, that is an art historian in a nutshell. They will sit there and say, well, this is what we thought the artist was thinking. But unless you have letters, journals, forget it. This is what we think he might have thought, but we don't know.
And what Andrew Wyeth actually said was he left the apple on the table, and I liked the way it looked.
Exactly. Simple. Sometimes an apple's just an apple. It's not symbolic of, the Garden of Eden and all this, but people just can't let that go.
All of this makes me curious because you got a degree in clinical psychology. In fact, you worked for a number of years and still do in a psychiatric hospital with a forensic psychiatrist. And I'm wondering if understanding how people dissect what others are doing was part of what motivated you to do
One
that.
has nothing to do with the other. I wanted to do something that didn't have to do with my family. It's tough to come from a famous family when everyone's so talented. I wanted to know that I got into the schools I got into because of this, and maybe I got in for, because of my family, but the grades I got weren't because of my family. And I really love seeing patients. It's really fun, and I work with very violent,
criminally insane
sex offenders is my area of, they're called sexual paraphilias, but that's really my area of expertise, and I love it.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out how this sort of carrying on the family story fits in with that other part of your life.
It's just, I've got, the Victoria Wyeth, and then I have just, kind of Dr. Vic. I love it, and it really, I use my brain in a different way. Right now I'm not seeing patients, I'm just a research assistant, and it's like peeking into other people's lives. I just get to, find out everything about them, and it's very fulfilling.
Was it at all difficult not to be artistic? And I want to back up a little bit because you're a photographer and
But I can't paint. I have no talent.
Does that bother you?
I mean, sometimes, it would be nice to be able to paint. I write my boyfriend letters whenever I lecture, and I'll send him little sketches, and he'll say, well, we're not going to sell this one. I remember I sent him one of a mountain range, and he said it was just zigzags across the page. So I can't be bummed about something that there's just no possibility of having. But I definitely hope that when I have kids, it would be nice if,
skip maybe a generation.
That would be awesome.
And Andrew Wyeth had two sons, Nicholas, your father, and Jamie, your uncle. And of course, Jamie Wyeth is
a brilliant artist. Daddy's a very good artist too. He just chose not to do it. And I remember I said, why? And he said, because my brother loved it. And it's Daddy was good at it, but didn't love it. Jamie's brilliant at it, but also loves it. So you have to have both,
Your grandfather once said that your art goes as far as your love goes.
Right, exactly. You have to love something, and that's the thing. Like I love giving tours. I love it. I mean, it's so much fun. Whether it's for a nursing home of really underprivileged people, or the president of Poland, it's awesome.
Which you actually did give a tour of.
Yeah. But it just and so when I stop loving it, I'll quit. It's like having a crappy teacher. No one wants a bad teacher. It ruins it. So when I'm a bad teacher, I'll stop.
Is it a way to stay connected to someone you were really close to? And most young people don't grow up knowing their grandfather as well as you did.
It's a good question. I think that I enjoy giving the tours because when I'm speaking about him, I can hear him in my head. I have a pretty good memory, especially for auditory stuff, and so I can, even during a tour, I can kind of hear him be like, oh, you forgot this, and it'll just kind of pop in my head, and it just makes me feel, it makes me feel connected to him. I miss him so much. My favorite time of the day is when I wake up first thing in the morning and I forget he's dead. So I have like 30 seconds where I'm like, oh, I'm going to see Andy today, and then kind of reality sets in.
It sounds like you had some pretty lively conversations. He used to tell you to give him hell and break all the rules and those kinds of things. What's maybe the most lasting or memorable thing he ever taught you or said to you?
I think the last painting he described to me, he had come home in October of 2008 from Maine from the summer, and I didn't realize he was dying, you know. And
he's 90 at this point.
He was 90. Oh, no, he was 91. He had just turned
Okay.
91. And so he comes home with this big painting, and I guess in retrospect he did not look good, but I just sat there and asked about it, and he just started telling me about it, and I didn't realize that that was going to be the last time that we really kind of spoke in depth, you know.
You were one of the few people that he allowed or was comfortable having them watch him while he painted.
Right.
Did you talk to him while he painted?
No.
You just sat behind him
Yeah,
and
I
watched?
just sat there. I mean, not for tempers, like for watercolors. And I want to be clear, like, oh, I feel like I'm going to start crying. You're going to think I'm nuts. I would walk in on him painting and just kind of sit there, but I would never kind of just go and, you know, and kind of invite myself for the whole thing. It would be kind of when he was finishing up or something like that. Or I'd wake up and he'd just be kind of chilling outside painting. And, you know, it was my house. I'm going to eat my cornflakes, and, you know, if it bothers him, he could leave, you know.
It's funny because part of the reason he didn't like people to observe him, to watch him, if I'm correct, and you know better, was one, it was such an intimate thing to him. He said it was like watching him make love.
Exactly.
And the other was he didn't really want anyone's input. If somebody said, I love it, he thought that was bad because it would influence them. And if they said they hated it, it would do the exact same thing.
One person got to see everything, my grandmother. And she knew his work. I mean, she knows his work. You know, incredible stuff. He would show sometimes to, we have a wonderful housekeeper named Gail, and he did this great picture called Airborne of all these feathers flying. And he said, what do you think of it? She said, I don't like that one. And she came back the next day and he had glued a huge feather on it. He said, what about now? And he took the feather off and he had removed it. So I think that sometimes he would show it to people, but he was so sensitive. He showed me this picture once called Otherworld. I just didn't like the clouds. I said, I don't like it. He said, well, I'm never painting again. And I said, well, that's too bad. You know, in the end of the summer, there's 5 new paintings. I said, well, I thought you were painting again. Why change my mind? You know, he was very dramatic.
And here he was, the most popular, the most beloved living artist until he died. But on the other hand, he was also lambasted by some people who thought his paintings were too real.
Right. They hated it. They called him an illustrator. I mean, I remember when he died, my 2 friends and I sat in my apartment reading all the obituaries, and they were awful. I mean, some of them were so nasty. I remember the Wall Street Journal specifically, and we wrote a nasty letter to the Wall Street Journal, you know. And, I mean, I didn't sign it, but, you know, of course I'm saying this on TV, but great. Whoops. But, I mean, I think they
end
just,
up in an archive
I know,
somewhere,
right?
I know.
But they just didn't get it, you know, and that's why I do these lectures. I mean, art is complicated, but if you understand that he is just painting things that have meaning to him, so it might just be a dumb mug to someone, but if this is a mug that, you know, he got on his, you know, first, you know, honorary doctorate or something like that, he's going to want to paint it over and over again because the feelings about that mug will change.
And it was all about the emotions, wasn't it? He said that looking back, there was a retrospective of his work, and he said it was very difficult to look back at 70 years of work, in part because all of those emotions came back.
And he probably knew that was his last major retrospective. I think he knew that he was going to, you know, not last for that much longer. You know, I remember I called him. I was driving down the highway in Philly, and there's this bus with his painting on it. And I called him up. I'm like, Jesus Christ, you know, you're on the bus. And he said, I know, isn't that something? I said, well, you better not die. So I'm going to try, you know. And but it was like, just hold on, and he held on. But I think that he knew that that was probably the last major show.
Well, he was 88. That last retrospective, 175,000 people went to see it. That was the most of any living artist for the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
It was awesome. The first 2 days, I sat at the entrance to the show shaking everyone's hand, and it was so funny. They said, you mean he's not dead? I'm like, I don't think so. You know, are you sure? I'm like, well, let me check, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, the love that people have. I mean, I saw men. I was giving tours there. I met this guy after I got out from the bathroom, and he had flown in from Florida just to see the show. And I got hell from the museum, but I snuck him on my tour, and he was just so excited. Him and his, you know, his husband. I mean, it was so cool. You know, it was really neat. Yeah.
The guards at the Philadelphia Museum say that Christina's world. They get the 2 top questions at the Philadelphia Museum of Art is everyone wants to know where are the restrooms, and the second thing is where is Christina's world, which of course is
at the MoMA. Yep. Yeah, when I went, I'll tell you a fun story. I went to the Museum of Modern Art right after he died. And there's this woman sitting outside, you know, kind of answering questions. And I said, well, what can you tell me about Christina's world? She didn't know who I was. She said, we can't stand it. I said, really? I said, no, why is that? Well, it just doesn't fit here. And my best friend Adam's with me. And Adam's like, Vicky, just shut up, you know. And I thought, okay. And I remember, you know, revenge is a soup best served cold. So I waited and I went on National Public Radio. I told the whole story. So I think that's exactly what he would have wanted. But, you know, so the museum might not like it, some of the people there, but the public, they love it. Yeah. It's cool. I mean, my boyfriend's dad just went and just sent me a picture of everyone looking at it. I love it.
Well,
you know?
You mentioned earlier that you actually got to know all of these people because they were fixtures.
They were my babysitters.
When you grew up. Which makes me want to ask a couple of questions about Christina Olson. She was 55 years old at the time, and your father met her through your grandmother.
First date with my grandmother. Can you imagine? Yeah, first date.
Most people don't realize that Christina Olson is
Crippled.
And the reason she's looking as she is in that picture is because what did she have, cerebral palsy?
Well, we don't, this is where it gets tricky. We don't know what she had, but whatever it was left her crippled. And he said, you know, Vic, I went there in 1937 and it took me, you know, 11 years to do that picture. He said, I was up in the upstairs painting, it's called Wind from the Sea, with these curtains blowing. And I looked out and I saw her crawling across. And I thought to myself, well, that's it. That's her world. That's how she gets around. And so everyone says, oh, it's a painting about sadness and melancholy. I never heard such stuff. I mean, it's just, I say it's strength. I mean, this woman is, you know, dragging herself up the hill. Tough lady.
You mentioned N.C. Wyeth, your great-grandfather, a moment ago, who died tragically, I think in 1945. He was crossing a railroad crossing and his car stalled. He had his 4-year-old grandson in the car with him. Your grandfather said one of his great regrets is that he never painted his portrait, and it gave him a different feeling about portraiture in general. Did he ever paint your portrait?
Yes, he painted my portrait several times. And I do want to say one thing. He did paint NC. He drew him in pencil, but it wasn't this official, you know, and so forth. But it's interesting. He never painted him after his death. He painted so many models.
And he could have.
He totally could have.
Because weren't most of his paintings done from imagination? He didn't look.
Exactly.
He didn't look at photographs.
Very strange. I know that. Same thing. He didn't paint Christina after death or anything. Nor did Jamie. He never painted NC either. But yes, he did paint me. He did all these little sketches when I was little. But you can see, as a 34-year-old, I still can't sit still. So little sketches when I was younger, and then 3 major pieces. It was weird though. I was posing like half nude, and I don't care how famous he is. You know, it's weird. Taking your bra off for your grandfather, okay? And then he gave me like saggy breasts, and I was like, seriously? I was like, you got to give him a lift, you know? I'm like, I'm 21, and so he gave him a lift. It was good. I know, isn't that terrible?
So I'm curious, I guess, to know how you obviously influenced that particular picture. But to what extent did your grandmother influence what he did? And
amazing. I would say there's Andrew Wyeth and Andy. And so Andrew Wyeth is definitely so influenced by my grandmother. You know, I'm not married, so I can't quite answer this, but my grandfather said when you get married, the wife kind of takes over the house, you know, and she decorates and so forth. And so many of the portraits done at our houses are definitely a portrait of my grandmother. Everything's so organized, the pink curtains, seashells lined up. But then you have these Andy watercolors that are just wild. I mean, you know, just paint splashed all over the place. He's digging his fingernails and so forth, stepping on things. So I think that she helped center him and focus him. This man one day said, your grandmother has made your grandfather who he is. And I got very upset, and I got home, and we got in a fight. You know, you can always tell when you're close to someone, you can, you know, fight with them. He said, you don't understand. She made me the man that I am. And I said, but without your paintings, you know, it would be nothing, you know? And he said, no, you know, you could have a brilliant artist, but it's to have someone market him that is the key. And she's brilliant. Even at 92, I mean, she's still sitting there. I was with her the other day, and she said, I want those pillows moved over there because they complement the white. They complement the white in that picture, still into moving everything around.
Well, then I'm really curious to know your take on the Helga Rebellion. 15 years, 240 portraits of Helga Testorf, a German neighbor, that were secret. For years, and when they were unveiled, they made an enormous splash. Did your grandmother really know about those paintings? Or
I don't think so. No, I mean, I think she would have put a stop to it. I mean, she had seen a couple of them, and, you know, was upset and said, don't do anymore. But I'll explain this as like the art historian and then as the granddaughter. As the art historian, it's the best thing he ever did. It's the most brilliant body of work. I have never seen one American artist paint someone that consistently for so many years. As his granddaughter, probably not the best thing. I feel badly when I have kids and they're in school and they Google their great grandfather before I have the chance to tell them that they'll see that. So I think that sometimes artists do things so they don't maybe think about the consequences.
But the way he explained it was he needed to do something that was entirely his own, not influenced by anybody else. So,
but he could have painted trees, So I think it's tricky. I mean, that's why I don't date artists. I would never be able to deal with that. It's just too much, I mean, would you? I mean, how would you feel if your husband, spent all day painting someone nude, and then came home to you? I mean, it's got to be tough. She's a strong woman. My grandmother, she's tough. She ran that household. Let me tell you.
She also apparently had an artist's touch when it came to creating a homestead, really, on these islands in
incredible.
Maine.
I mean, she created these two little villages that are just, they're absolutely incredible. Allen Island and Benner Island. It's quite remarkable. It's very private and, the private little islands. But it's funny, there's this boat that goes by every day at 2 and 5, and it's kind of like the Wyeth tour boat. And so, how do you explain this to someone? So I waved. So I got out there with my iPhone and I videotaped for my boyfriend. Everyone starts clicking away. And I said, Andrew Wyeth's over there painting. And they all turn their cameras, trying to, is he really there? So I guess I deal with it by just kind of laughing and so forth.
How difficult is the Wyeth legacy for someone like Jamie Wyeth?
I think he handles it really well. I think he's so smart about, he always puts his artwork first, but he's so sensitive to children and the public and so forth. I think he's doing a wonderful, brilliant job. I think it was really hard when we all lost Andy. He was the glue. He was the patriarch, but Jamie.
And Jamie grew up, it seems, so similarly to how Andy Wyeth grew up.
Exactly.
With his father
Always
teaching
there.
him, and with his father, with him both from early ages being homeschooled, because their focus, they both realized, was art.
Well, actually, Andy didn't teach Jamie. Andy's sister, Carolyn, taught Jamie. But Andy...
He always had that influence.
Exactly. But Andy was always there, and so they'd paint together. But I would call him kind of more of like an influence, a mentor, if you will. But
what's the biggest Wyeth myth that you would like to shatter?
That my family paints from photos. This idea that Jamie and my grandfather are sitting there clicking away is just ridiculous. They are out there at 5 in the morning, freezing, I mean, my uncle especially, Jamie, wild, he's out there in the middle of winter painting icebergs floating by his hands, or he's freezing, his teeth are chattering, and that's love.
And the amount of research, actually, that went into, for instance, his portrait of John F. Kennedy posthumously.
Yeah, incredible.
I mean, hours and hours and hours
studying
of
Ted
studying.
and Bobby.
Right, studying the siblings so that he could get a feel for him. I thought, I can't believe anyone would go through that.
Jamie's understanding of anatomy blows me away. I mean, he went and took anatomy classes, at Jefferson Medical School, and even with this obsession with ornithology, he's got, ornithologists going out to the island, telling him how to communicate with ravens and seagulls. I mean, I expect my uncle to just kind of turn into a seagull one day and just kind of fly off. I mean, he really, it's something else. But if you're going to do something, do it. Don't just kind of half-ass it. If you're going to paint, go paint. If I'm in a lecture, I'm going to really, go wild.
You learned that, what you're saying right now, at your grandfather's knee.
Definitely, yeah. And I learned that if you're going to do something, you start young. He always told me when I have kids, if they paint, fine, wait till they're 14, and then you pull them out of school, and then you push them. Like, push them. Like, no TV, no video games, no telephone, just painting 5-6 hours a day. I'm sure they'll hate me for it, but that's how you do it. So,
Looking back on your grandfather's life and the fact that a lot of people look at his paintings and some see isolation and loneliness, do you think any of that is true of your grandfather?
I mean, I knew him as this very affectionate, loving person who gave the best hugs. So I don't see that. I see some of the pictures a result of, he had pain. I mean, it was pain. I mean, his father got crushed by a train, and I think he just never never dealt with that. I mean, it's very hard, you know, and so I think that we all have different ways to show our pain. I mean, I chose to kind of take all of the sadness of, you know, watching. I mean, I watched my grandfather die, you know, and instead of kind of becoming
Peacefully at home,
very
though.
peacefully, yeah, very
Oh, I
peacefully.
mean,
but it's like, yeah, I mean, peacefully. But it's no fun watching someone you love die and you're sitting there wheezing, and you know, I mean, it's hard, and you can't do anything.
He had one
in your
lung
health.
late
Right?
in
Yeah,
life.
he had one lung, and he was not a happy camper. You know, he was definitely he was
Suffering.
cranky. Yeah, he was suffering. He was cranky. I mean, it was no fun. He couldn't eat. You know, but I think you just, you know, I think that he was a very happy person, but I think he had the ability to tap into maybe a side of nature that we don't like to look at, you know, and I wouldn't call it sad, but it's definitely, it's not, you know, bright green with flowers everywhere, but, you know.
And bright green with
Right.
flowers didn't show up in too many of his
No,
paintings.
I mean, I'll tell you, as soon as spring comes, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I am a Wyeth 110%, you know, I mean.
You like things in black and white subdued
I
colors.
love it. I mean, my boyfriend loves the summer. And I just, oh my God, I was counting the days, and now I'm so excited driving up here. I'm like, everything's turning brown. I'm so excited. I know. I love it.
Victoria Wyeth, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Victoria Browning Wyeth. Comcast subscribers can watch this program anytime on Penn State On Demand. Find out how through our website, conversations.psu.edu, where you'll also find more on the art of Andrew Wyeth. I'm Patty Satalia. We hope you'll join us for our next Conversation from Penn State.
Production funding provided in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you. Thank you. This has been a production of WPSU.